Hi guys, and welcome to a new video for Aperture Speaks. And this week's video is all about editing black and white images in Lightroom. So I have two images here. This one is a HDR image, which was actually produced via exposure fusion, and this one is just a straightforward raw image. So I'll start with this image to begin with. The first thing I actually do is I don't use any other way of desaturate apart from clicking here to go to black and white mode. I go into the black and white mode because it automatically gives you the black and white mix, HS black and white mix here, to sort of edit the image. Now, if you just go into color, and you click black and white there, it takes you straight into the black and white mode. So you don't have to click here, you can also click it down here as well. So I have this image here. I'm just going to have a quick look at it in color. Now there is a few different things wrong with it. It needs to be cropped and rotated and things like that. So that's what I sort of always do first. The reason I do this first is because I like to have sort of basically the sort of composed image before I start doing my further editing to it. So just give it a quick rotation there. I'm going to drop down here and just enable the lens corrections. I probably need to do a manual one, which is just to get this a little bit straighter. What I've done is gone for the straightness of the bar, which actually is not that straight, just by there. Okay. Go to 0, let's look better now. No, it needs a little bit, just a little bit, maybe like 2. Okay, and now I'm going to just crop this in. Now crop this up here. Okay. And shunt you across, because I quite like a lot of this bit here. Okay. So that's, I've just done a quick crop there, and it's not looking too bad. Oh, apart from I've still caught the bottom of this railing here. Crop. Yeah, that looks a bit better now. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Now I'm going to switch into the black and white mode. And I'm just going to do some basic look around at the settings. So the highlights don't want to be pushed all the way up here. These will back down to normal. And we can see this here. So this is quite a flat image. So when you go down here, you have the black and white mixer. Okay. So what this takes is the red tones, the orange tones, the yellow tones, green tones, aqua, blue, purple, and magenta, and it assigns them a value. If the more you are this way, the whiter this, the lighter this color will be. The more you go this way, the darker this color will be. So if you pull down the red, you can see how everything that was had a slight red to it is now become darker, and you can see how the histogram here has also changed. So I quite like I generally like my blues and my reds a little bit darker. I've got green in this, so I probably like lighten the green. Well, I either lighten the green, darken the yellow, and this will just create a little bit of contrast. Generally with greens and foliage, and just create some natural contrast. Generally, if you move something and you see it's like, you can just see where it is here, and you can just adjust it. Okay, magenta. It's quite a bit on magenta. Okay. Now the other way you can make these adjustments are also with this here. Okay, you just make a clicker, and you click on it, and you pull down, it makes it darker, and you pull up, and it will make it brighter, just like that. So let's say I'm looking at this bit of this wall, and I'm like, okay, maybe this wall could be a bit darker. I can just pull this down, and you can see it is moving the orange and it's moving the red together. I'm looking here and I'm like, oh, this needs to be lighter for sure. And then this is going to pull up the magenta and the purple. And you can just see how that's affecting the overall image. But what it does, it takes those tones and it brightens them. So if this was red here and I wanted this red to be darker and this does red here which I want to be lighter, then I would actually have to go in and do a separate adjustment. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to go up here. So the exposure works as basically adjusting the position of the midtones. The other thing you can do is actually just click onto the histogram itself and it will make the changes for you. And you see that's now taken to plus 24. Your highlights, this moves the highlights and it actually shows the highlighted portion that is actually changing. It's just here. And so the same as with the exposure, you can just click on that area of the histogram and go, okay, I want this a little bit darker, or I want this a little bit brighter. And it works the same. The shadows is about here. This is the exposure. But you also have black and white. So you can actually change the black and the whites. One thing you can do is if you hold down Alt while you move the black slider, you can see where the blacks are being clipped. Now what I mean by being clipped is, if you look at the histogram here, once it goes past this edge, you have clipped the black. So whatever tones are now here, they are black and they will not get any lighter. So if I just click this, you can see I have this black spot just here. Okay, and if I click on white, it does the exact same thing. That here I have some clipping. So you just pull that in and it removes the clipping. So it's no longer being clipped. And if I take this black and I move it this way quite a bit, black is no longer clipped. But you can see how that has now become quite dull. A black and white image needs to have it needs to have an absolute black and absolute white. And this is for our eyes to create the contrast and to see the contrast. If you don't have an absolute black and absolute white, then you cannot see the contrast. And just by making that slight adjustment there, where I have a little bit now, the picture looks a bit more, doesn't look as flat, basically. The shadows, the same thing. You can then locate where the shadows are. And the same thing with the highlights. You can just look at these areas and then that's there in the middle. So let's just add in some contrast just to beef that up a bit. Okay. Clarity is something which adjusts the midtone contrast. A lot of people think clarity actually sharpens the image. It doesn't. It just boosts up the midtone contrast, and you can see how it works. If you go this way, it's just it's weakening and lowering the midtone contrast, and you go this way, it's making it more intense. Black and white images work mainly on texture and contrast. So by having quite a bit of contrast, it can be quite good. Once again, now we click blacks, there's a lot of black areas, there's a lot of white areas. And here's the whites, here's the whites, and here's the blacks. You don't have the vibrance or the saturation. So the other way you can actually adjust the contrast is you can set the basic contrast here, and then just go into the curves panel and just fine tune your contrast a little bit. Now there's two ways you can do that. You can have one with a point curve if you're sort of more used to the Photoshop way of doing things. Or you can do it with the options, where here you have the options to either select this bit here and it'll only adjust the shadows. So if you go this way, you'll make the shadows lighter. If you go this way, you'll make the shadows darker. And you also have the little point thing again. So you're like, oh, okay, I think this bit needs to be a little bit darker, so it'll adjust that there. Maybe this bit needs to be a little bit darker as well, but I still like this bit lighter. And you can create your S-curve. So you have your sharpening, noise reduction, which I know roughly how much it needs to be because of the ISO. Then again, you could just sort of leave the noise in. Noise and grain are sort of inherent to photography, to black and white photography. Okay, I quite like that. Let's go out. Lens correction we already did. Okay, and then on the effects you can add in just a bit of stylizing as well. So you have three different things here: highlight priority, color priority, and paint overlay. I generally use highlight priority when adding these effects in. So this is just this is going to be a post crop vignette, and what this means is it's actually taking the crop which I have and it's using that for the vignette as the area space to vignette. Whereas if you added the vignette on lens correction, it adds it in a slightly different way, as you can see here. So I won't be using it for the lens correction, I'll be using it here. So I just add a slight vignette in, just darkening those corners in, making this a bit more interesting. You can select the size of the midpoint. So the midpoint can be right in here. And back it up a little bit. How round is it going to be? So it can be like a little spotlight torch, or it can be slightly more squared. The feather, nothing, or quite a lot. Okay. And then this bit just lets in the highlights a little bit as well. There. And the final bit you can do is just add in some grain. So you can make this quite a grainy image. That's like old 6400 ISO. 3200, no, 3200 pushed, maybe. How rough do you want it? So you can sort of play around that. And that's what makes it a little bit old. I don't really like grain, so I'm going to turn that all off. There you go. That's like a basic adjustment really for into black and white. Obviously now we can look at our histogram. We can sort of change things a little bit by going, okay, we'll pull back the blacks maybe a little bit, or Control Z. Maybe look at maybe just pulling up the shadows. It was, or like that. Maybe adjusting this a little bit more. Maybe deepening this a lot more, just to give a slightly more interesting contrast. This, and then pick this up right at the end. Just to create a slightly more interesting image. Now with black and white, there's always toning, and in Photoshop you can do that with split toning. And the way it works is you have the highlights and the shadows. So one set of adjustments, you can have the color just for the highlights, and you can like increase or decrease saturation, and then just create like a sepia-ish tone, or you can do a dew tone. Let's go with a rustic red I like to use. Oop. Turn that saturation down a little bit. This is just in the shadows there. And then you can move the balance. You can shift the image more towards the shadows, or you can shift it more towards the highlights. What this means is the prominence of toning is more in the highlights, or it's more into the shadows. And in this case, I think maybe here looks quite nice. It's very soft. I don't really like to have toning too hard or too heavy. Okay. So what I'll do is move on to the other image to show you some other things that you can do when you're editing. So one thing I'm just going to do some quick basic adjustments in here. Just straighten it up a little bit. possibly. Maybe go to lens corrections. Just to give it a bit more balance, I suppose. Okay. Let's go right to the top here. Just close this out. I like the crop. It's not too bad. And I'll go into the once again the noise reduction. There shouldn't be too much because before I did the HDR, I actually reduced the noise, so it shouldn't be too much noise in there. Okay, and let's go to black and white. So here we are. Now, one of the things you can do in the black and white adjustment here is you can actually sort of emulate sort of color filters, and you can do that by just adjusting the strength of these colors. So let's say we want like a blue filter, which so if you want to have a red filter, you wouldn't actually use the red. Okay, the reason for that is that the red filter actually cut out the blues or darkened the blues when it came through the lens. So you can just darken this down here. Okay, or in the case of using the picker, you can just grab the blue in the sky and you can just darken it, just like that. And so you can actually have that black sky effect, especially then when you can go in and make other adjustments, maybe with the adjustment brush. So let's not make it too dark. Let's just make it dark enough. Okay, this white here, which probably still fixate on the blue. So let's do that a minute later. So I'm just going to go through quickly and just make some varying adjustments, just like I did earlier. So let's quite like that. Oh, it's there. Okay, so this magenta. Magenta will be somewhere there as well. Now these buildings would have this sort of yellow color, so you gotta be careful. If you go like too far, you go black. So maybe just light up those yellows a bit. It has to be clipping. Yeah. And so this also is no way you can work out the clipping. Just hold your mouse over here and you get little red dots. And you can see where you're just sort of clipping things a little bit. Clipping's not that bad sometimes. It just depends on how much you clip. Because if you do like this, you have a lot of clipping, it can look pretty nasty. Once you're happy, obviously, with your adjustments, you can actually save a preset. Once you save the preset, you can come here and you can set your own. So this is my so-called daguerreotype preset, which I created. It's supposed to emulate daguerreotype tones. So you just click on that preset, and then I take the blue and I pull that blue back down, and you get the darkish sky here. Of course, with the daguerreotype preset, I've already got my S-curve, but then you can do other adjustments at the top here. So just going to go in here, maybe just move the exposure up a little bit, brightens this area here. Contrast, maybe not that too much. I sort of want to bring the highlights in a little bit. I also want to bring the shadows in a little bit as well, because they're a little bit too dominating there. And maybe more sensitive down a little bit. Whites are not too bad. Yes, we press this here. Blacks. Okay, so we've got the beginning of it there. Okay. So look at this contrast. So mine is a little bit darker down. Okay, there we go. But also just a little bit higher up. Same time. Now, what I've just found is that in making this brighter, I'm actually doing a slight effect on the rest of the image. So I'm just going to get my adjustment brush. Zoom in. Ooh, got some sort of artifacts as well. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just adjust the contrast a little bit. Before I do that, I didn't adjust the clarity, so clarity. Okay, let's go that bit. So I just want this bit a little bit brighter, so I just give it this, just to contrast a little bit, maybe not so much the exposure. Okay. And now I'm still not happy with this. Is really, really bright. So I'm just going to create a new one. Reducing the highlights. See how much effect that has. So reducing the highlights didn't actually do that much. So maybe I just need to reduce the exposure down that bit. Okay, there we are. There you go. And that looks quite nice. That looks quite nice there as well now. So I'm just going to close that up. And there we are. So do some toning. Yeah, I'll just do some quick toning just to finish this up. This time I'm actually going to more into this blue. For the highlights, I'm going to reduce saturation slightly. And then more like a midnighty. Yeah, a lot darker. You go right down. And it's got this slightly bluish tone to it, which really looks quite nice as well. I actually prefer this now as a black and white image to the image I originally had. Maybe the only thing which is really maybe a little bit not working for me is the crop in here. But it doesn't really matter because then I have to crop into that bit there. So I'll just keep it like that because you can sort of see. Okay. So there we are. That's the final two images. Both of them had a little bit of different editing at the end, but this one with the adjustment brushes and things. I hope you enjoyed the video, and you can follow me on my blog, which is aperture64.wordpress.com. You can follow me on Twitter, which is @aperture64, or you could follow me on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/aperture64. This time just typing 64 out. Until next week, goodbye.